Ready?
Yes. You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for chapel this morning. My name is Justin. I am the middle school pastor at Hope Point Church of the Nazarene here in Yuba City. I'm glad you're with us. Before we jump in, pray with me. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunity to gather from all across the city together just to hear from you. God, as we tune in today, as we meet separate but together, would you remind us that you are bigger than what's in front of us, that you are bigger than the distance between us, and that as we join together today, we do that together, united in our desire to grow in you. So God, as I speak, would you push me aside? Would this not be about my words, but would it be all about you? Would you speak through me today to everyone who's tuning in? Amen. So when I was in high school, I was not a great athlete. I wasn't good at basketball, football, any of those ball sports. I wasn't very coordinated. And so some of my friends convinced me to go out for track. I figured I can run in a straight line. How hard could that be? So I show up for my very first track practice, no experience. My coach says, hey, I think I want you to run the 400-meter dash. I would come to learn that that word dash at the end is very important. It's not a paced run. It's not a race where you are conserving energy trying to make it through the race. No, you are running all out. It is a sprint from start to finish, and 400 meters is not a short distance. Think about it, that's about the length of 4 football fields. You can run 100 meters or you can run 200 meters and still have enough breath in your lungs to carry on a conversation at the end. But if you run a 400-meter dash right, you want to collapse and pass out at the end. It's brutal, and what's even more brutal is the training to build up to the event. Every week in practice, multiple times a week, our coach would have us run a 300-meter workout, which might sound better because it's shorter, but the catch was we had to run 4 or 5 of them in a row with 10, if my coach was feeling nice, 15 seconds of rest in between. So run 300 meters as fast as you can, don't even catch your breath, and before you're ready, she's telling you to go again as fast as you can. It's brutal. Never felt slower, never felt more out of shape. It was so difficult, I even considered going to my coach and asking if I could switch to the 2-mile event, a race that's like 8 times longer, just because the training and practice wasn't as brutal. And as I was kind of thinking about this the other day and kind of reflecting on my days as a track athlete, and just missing all the sports that are should be going on right now that have been canceled or postponed. For some of you guys, it's been difficult. Just think of this whole COVID mess that we're in. Just thinking about track, and the only time I can really watch track, one of my favorite sports, on TV is during the Summer Olympics, which have been postponed a year because of COVID. It's crazy. And so I was thinking about that, and Mr. Darty asked me to speak for chapel today, and it just kind of reminded me of one of my favorite scriptures. He asked me to speak on faith, and one of my favorite, and if I'm honest, sometimes the least favorite scriptures comes from the book of James in chapter 1. And so a little bit of background on the book of James, if you're not familiar with it. It's written by a guy named James, who was the half-brother of Jesus. He was also one of the most prominent leaders in the first Christian church in Jerusalem. And so here's what he says in chapter 1. We'll look at verses 1 through 4. He says, "This letter is from James, a slave of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm writing to the 12 tribes, Jewish believers scattered abroad. Greetings. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." So that's a very short passage, but it is kind of a heavy passage. So let's pause and look at that for a second. Specifically verse 2, where he says, "Consider it, dear brothers and sisters, consider that when trouble of any kind comes your way, consider an opportunity for great joy." I don't know about you, but that feels a little bit odd on first take. Let's look at that a little bit deeper. He's saying that when your best friend stabs you in the back or turns on you or hurts you in some way, to view it as an opportunity for joy. Yeah, I don't know about that one. Or your mom or your dad come home after a long day and they are upset and they say some things that are, again, hurtful. We should celebrate that opportunity. Yeah, I don't know. This might be kind of a long shot. I don't know. I don't know if you can relate to this one, but I just imagine there was a global pandemic that kind of put the world at a standstill. All of our sports were canceled or postponed. School, we had to go to distance learning and sit all day staring at a computer screen and doing all of this work by ourselves with no human interaction. There's wildfires around the state destroying homes and property and livelihoods. There's riots happening in the street. There's even 2 hurricanes that happened at the same time and hit the same stretch of coast and were pretty devastating. I even heard in the news that a hurricane might have hit the state of Iowa in the middle of the country, not near any body of water. Didn't know that was possible. Again, just that's all theory. I don't know if you can imagine what that would be like or not. But Jim's saying if that were to happen, you should consider it an opportunity for joy. I don't know. And here's what he's saying. He's not saying that you should just stick it out, that you should just push through and you'll get through it and things will eventually be okay. No, he actually has the audacity to tell us to be joyful in the midst of it. And I don't know about you, but when I'm facing trouble or difficult times, the first thing that pops into my mind isn't that it's an opportunity. It's actually not a word that pops into my mind at all. And the only reason the word joy or happiness comes into my mind is because I'm not experiencing it, and I wish that I was. James is saying on your worst day, in the middle of one of the worst years that we have seen, to be joyful. So again, if you're anything like me, when trouble, when difficult times are in front of me, my first reaction is to say, God, can you please just take this away? Could you please just make things a little better, a little easier, because then I could find joy. If life was good, then I could find joy, but surely there's no way I could truly find happiness in the midst of everything that's going on. Again, going back to my days when I was running track in high school. Again, I was about a month into the season and I was just feeling defeated. Races that I was running on at events, I wasn't finishing anywhere near the front. Practice running these brutal workouts just felt so slow, like I was just wasting my time. So I was actually on my way to my coach to ask if I could change to a different event. And before I could say anything, she showed me a clipboard that had some numbers on it. Those numbers were times, and what I didn't realize was throughout the season, up to that point, my coach had been keeping track of my times as I ran those 300-meter workouts. And in the beginning, where I felt slow, it's because I was probably as slow as a turtle walking around the track. It was embarrassing. But what I didn't realize is I was shaving time off every week. Each week I was getting 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 seconds, 15 seconds faster each workout that I ran. That changed my perspective. Right? No longer was I just thinking that I was the slowest person in the world. That no longer was I thinking that I couldn't do it. What I realized was that all of the trouble I was going through, all of the pain that I was facing, was actually making me a better runner. It was building my physical endurance. So again, one of the reasons I've heard this passage from the time I was little, and one of the reasons I've always hated it was because in those moments when we're faced with trouble, faced with difficult things that we don't want to deal with, that we never wish on ourselves or even other people, in those moments it can be impossible to see or understand how anything good could happen. I think this is at the core of what James is getting at. So often when we are struggling, we're facing trouble, when we're facing difficulties, our desire is to try and grab onto something to control. We're trying to find some sense of normalcy, something that we can control and make feel right and feel better. Maybe we think, if only I could teach that one person who hurt me a lesson. I could just show them what they did to me. I might feel a little bit better. Or if I could just get the attention of this group or this person, I wouldn't feel so lonely. If I could just reach this goal or avoid this outcome, if I could just control my circumstances a little bit more, maybe things wouldn't hurt so bad. But what James is really telling us is that God is always wanting us to rely on ourselves less and to rely on Him more. When we do that, we're able to find joy in trouble. We realize that we're in a situation where we cannot succeed, we can't make it if He doesn't show up. And let's be honest, if there's anybody who has the experience to speak on this truth, anybody who's experienced this scripture and what he's talking about, it was James, the one who's writing it. Again, James was one of the leaders of the first Christian church in Jerusalem, and they faced some difficult times. Right, there's a brutal famine that wiped out a lot of people's livelihoods, and it caused hunger and unrest and a lot of poverty. Like some of us know, the early Christian movement wasn't a popular movement. There was a lot of people who not only just disliked them, but they persecuted them. A lot of Roman officials and Jewish people who didn't believe in the teachings of Jesus would actively persecute and kill early Christians. And James was one of those. Not long after he wrote this letter, he was martyred and killed for his faith. So if anybody has authority to speak on this topic, it's James. But here's the thing, we sometimes get so bogged down on verse 2 and that really difficult truth that he's telling us to live into, to find joy in trouble, that we forget what he says in verses 3 and 4. Here's what he says. He says, "For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you'll be perfect and complete, needing nothing." The word perfect that he uses is actually a really significant word in this letter. He uses it 7 more times as the letter goes on. And in Greek, it's the word teleos. And it means wholeness or even integrity. And it refers to living a life where our actions are always consistent and they always line up with the life and teaching of Jesus. So what James knows is that we are all flawed and broken people. We are far from perfect in so many ways, and we are all living with more inconsistencies and more compromises to our character than we are really willing to admit. But what James knows is that God is on a mission to restore us back to wholeness, back to the perfection He created us to be. And that it all starts with wisdom. It all starts with the ability to see our hardships from a new perspective. And so what James experienced and what he's wanting us to experience as well is that when we come to God humbly, when we come and we ask for that wisdom, for His wisdom, not our own, He gives it generously. And it's this wisdom, just true wisdom, that enables us to see joy in trouble. It allows us to see that joy and happiness doesn't really come from our circumstances. It doesn't come from a lack of pain. It doesn't come from a lack of difficulty. It doesn't come from not having a global pandemic turn the world on its head. It comes from trusting in God alone. See, when we come to God humbly, trusting in Him, putting our faith in Him, asking to receive His wisdom, not our own, it puts us in a place where we have a choice to make. We can either choose to lean on fear and anxiety, or we can choose to trust in Him. And when we do, He, again, promises to give us the wisdom to see circumstances differently, to see that the trouble we're facing is actually causing us to grow closer to Him. It's actually forcing us to depend on Him more than ourselves, and that's where I want to be. So here's my challenge to you today. Really simple. But just take a moment and look at your life. Look at where you are today. Your thoughts, your attitude, your feeling on everything that's going on around us. Where in your life could you trust a little bit less on your own ability to fix things, to make things right, to find joy, and trust a little bit more in God? Where could you let go of control and hold on to God's goodness? Where in your life can you stop choosing to live in fear and anxiety and start living a little more in faith?